Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel on Hobbies. I am continuing with my discussion about the House of Balsa 1/2 A size Chipmunk model kit that I built recently. And today I'm going to talk about just the modification I did so that I could have a steerable tail wheel and rudder. Now the kit called for basically a fixed tail gear and a fixed rudder, but I decided to go ahead and do a little modification so that I can have some ground control, and probably not a big deal during flight to have the rudder, but you know, might as well have it since I can do it. So let's talk about it. Okay, so here's the plan showing the tail section. So here's the fixed tail wheel as designed, and then the rudder glues straight onto the vertical stabilizer per the plan. So what I did to do modification for the tail wheel, I cut this part of the rudder out, and that was just now open. Of course, I hinged it, put hinges in here. And then what I did is I took a piece of this control rod tubing. This is sort of the inner tubing, and I cut a little section of it, and I used it as a conduit. And what I did is I glued it right sort of in here like this, and I put a little piece of wood to reinforce it. And then what I did is I took a piece of piano wire and I brought it up through the conduit, and I actually glued on another piece of tubing in here right below the rudder, and this would be the outer tubing from a control rod, and then brought the wire in from here, and then I brought it through here and then bent it over, and then it's going to slide, or it slides inside of this this tubing that I put there. I had to do it like in steps because obviously I have to make the bends as I constructed it. So what I did is I made this bend first, and then I had the wire sticking out this way, and then I installed the rudder, and then I bent the tail wheel assembly, and I have pictures to show that. So that's essentially what I did to get it to work. So then when the rudder moves, it just brings the tail wheel with it. Okay, so for the control rod, because the rudder sits above the elevator, I had to bring the control rod up above the whole assembly of the elevator. And so I just drilled a small hole on the top of the fuselage back here, and then I just brought a wire in, and then, as I'm kind of drew it already, but I brought a wire in, I did a little dog leg into it, and then I brought it straight back and I connected it to the control horn. And that's how it's going to control the rudder and obviously the tail wheel with it. Alright, well here's a picture of the tail section. Now originally it was hollow, and what I did is I took a piece of balsa wood and I shaped it, and that's what that triangular block is right there. And I just inserted that in order to help support the tail section and the tail wheel itself. And then I drilled that hole through the balsa block all the way through, so that the plastic tubing for which the piano wire was going to slide into could be supported. Alright, so then I stuck the yellow tubing in the tail section, and then I cut it to the right size, and then it sticks out a little bit because the elevator assembly is going to sit on top of that, and this way it's all going to be flush when it's finished. And then for the bottom, I just added a piece of plywood, and I just shaped it as you see there, and that's just to add some additional support. And then for the rudder itself, I glued on another piece of tubing, as you see there. I used epoxy, and that is so that the tail wire, or the tail wheel wire, will slide into that, and that's how it's going to move the rudder. Okay, well here's it's a little bit of a fast forward, but here's the finished rudder, and the little tube glued onto the bottom of the rudder is where the wire for the tail wheel is going to slide into. So when I move the rudder, it's going to carry the tail wheel with it. Okay, well here's the tail wheel wire assembled into the tail section of the airplane. And what you can see here is the wire goes through the tail section through that little tube that I installed, the yellow tube that we talked about earlier. And then the wire is, when it gets above the elevator, then it makes a 90-degree turn, or a 90-degree angle bend, and that's what's shown right here. And then the rudder is going to slide onto that. Alright, well here's a picture of the vertical stabilizer epoxied onto the fuselage. and then you can see the wire that is bent over again. The 90-degree angle comes up above the elevator, and again that is what the rudder is going to slide onto. So the first thing was I had to put the vertical stabilizer on, glue that in place, and then the next is going to be to put the actual rudder on. I realized I didn't have a great picture of the final tail wheel assembly, but this picture shows the tail wheel, and of course it goes up into the tail section, and then it goes over and makes that bend, and then the rudder, as you see there, has been installed, and it slid onto that wire, and I hinged it into the vertical stabilizer. Alright, well, as talked about in the beginning of this video, here is the control rod that I made that little slot in the fuselage, and then I came through and made a little dog leg in it, and I connected it to the control horn on the rudder. Alright, well, the last thing I did was I cleaned up the area where the control rod exits the fuselage. I put a little piece of Monocoat to sort of cover up the hole a little bit better, and then I used yellow paint and I painted the control horn and the control rod just to help it blend in a little bit better. Alright, well, that's it for now. Next time I think I'm going to hopefully just finish this up. I'm going to talk about the covering of the model, and then the servos I used and sort of the final steps. And then a video after that, I think I'll just do the engine, start up the engine, do a trial run on the ground, and then we'll do a maiden flight. So thanks for watching. Again, this is James. This is On Hobbies, and we'll see you next time.